So today we're going to talk about Orlando City in the moving forward series, and you just got to feel like this year was a setback for Orlando City. I mean, yes, they made it to the playoffs again, and this is the second consecutive year that they're able to do, but considering the fact that last year when they finally made it to the playoffs for the first time after being in the league for 5 years, and the fact that they were able to win a playoff game, and the fact that this year they actually end up almost missing out on the playoffs before suffering an early playoff exit, there's definitely some disappointment in there if you're an Orlando City fan, and especially with the way that this team, at least for the first half of the season, they look like a team that could compete in the Eastern Conference. I mean, I had a feeling that they would potentially lose to a good team like New England, with the way that there was time where this team kind of struggle against some of the toughest opponents when they face, and now with one key thing I'll talk about that kind of was one of the main reason why a lot of people don't trust that Orlando City is actually a contender, and they're kind of almost like a pretender in the Eastern Conference, but they were still near the top part of the Eastern Conference for majority of the year, and then they did their usual second half collapse that almost made them missing out on the playoffs and literally only secure a playoff position on the final day of the season. So overall, they finished the season with a 13-12-9 record and finished with 51 points. They scored 50 goals this season, which seems like a lot, but considering the fact that, this season, Orlando really kind of struggled in terms of goal scoring. Like, a lot of games that they play, they rarely crack the 2-goal mark, and I think the only game I remember where they really go right in terms of goal scoring form was against the San Jose Earthquakes when they won 5-0, and that was really the game when Daryl Dike, making his return for Orlando City for the first time since his loan to Barnsley, and everybody was kind of excited the fact that he of course is back and he's going to do some good thing. But besides that, they were not a team that's known for the firepower as we saw from previous season, and definitely a team that was not as fun to watch as it was last season. I mean, last season I talked about how this team was such a fun team to watch because Oscar Pereira played that beautiful brand of soccer. This year, it just feel like it wasn't, and it feel like maybe Oscar Pereira kind of decided to maybe take the fun out a little bit, and I'm not quite sure, is it just because of the fact that maybe they want to be a little bit solid on the defensive end. I mean, their defense was pretty good. I mean, even though I know they conceded 48 goals, this defense was definitely decent throughout the season, and they had a +2 goal differential. But again, it's kind of weird that this team, just with how fun that they played last season, it's kind of a little bit surprised that they decided to go with sometimes being very lackluster going forward on the attack. So they of course finished 6th in the Eastern Conference this season before eliminated in the first round of the playoffs by Nashville SC. Top goal scorer for this team, we got Nani, who of course is one of 3 Orlando City attacker that is not going to be coming back next season. Finished with 10 goals, followed by Junior Urso with 4 goals, Benji Michel with 4 goals, Tesha Akindele with 3 goals, and Robin Janssen with 3 goals. Now, one thing that I will also say about the top goal scorer that I checked on the Orlando City website is that they didn't mention Daryl Dike in the top goal scorer chart, and I'm not quite sure, is it because of the fact that Daryl Dike is now moving to West Brom that they kind of eliminate his stats. But that being said, that I don't think that could be a case with the way that I've seen before, where even when players move on to another team, teams usually keep player stats even though he is now no longer with the club. So it's kind of surprising that they decide not to include Daryl Dike in terms of the stat chart, because I'm pretty sure he at least scored 5 goals with this team. Like, I know he scored a hat-trick against the San Jose Earthquakes, but I know for sure that he also scored a couple of goals, and I think he was actually the second top goal scorer of this team behind Nani. But nevertheless, I'll never know, because again, in order for me to know, is I have to literally go back to all the Orlando City game, all the way back to when Daryl Dike made his return with Orlando City against the Quakes, and kind of just count how many goals that he scored. And yeah, that's going to be a little bit of a tedious task to do. Now, top assist leader for this Orlando City team, unsurprisingly, Mauricio Pereira, who really had a lot of issue with injuries this season, though he did still finish with 10 assists this season, and I think you could easily say that he is starting to become quietly one of the best playmaker in this league right now. Maybe an underrated playmaker because we talk about playmakers in the league. There's the Lucas Arian, Nico Laderos of the world, but not a lot of people talk about Maurizio Pereira and how he is quietly really the main master of this Orlando City team, is actually on the attack and pulling the string on the attack. But besides that, we got Nani with 8 assists, followed by Tesha Akindele with 6 assists. Then you got Chris Mueller with 6 assists and Juan with 4 assists to round up the top 5 assist leader for Orlando City. So what went right for this Orlando City team? So yeah, they made the playoffs again. I mean, I guess Orlando City fans are happy that they made it to the playoffs. I mean, it's getting to a point where, I've said this before with teams that usually go through a playoff drought. When you finally make it to the playoffs, it's a good feeling. But you can also feel like, some of the fans are starting to feel like, well, we make the playoffs, but now let's see if we can, of course, make it a regular thing. And at least for Orlando City, seems like they could potentially do so. And that's even with some of the big pieces that they lost this offseason. They finally sold DK for a good sum of money, and notice I used the keyword good because, with the amount that they sold DK to West Brom, which was about $10 million, I mean, with the way that how DK looked last year with Barnsley, and especially with the way that we thought when he does come back to Orlando City for a short stint and continue to light up in MLS, we thought he was going to be like a $20 or $30 million. So $10 million was kind of a little bit underwhelming, but that being said, DK did battle with some injury issue, and that, he did have his struggle with it, his time back with Orlando City, but nevertheless, I think, I know I said before that I'm kind of surprised that Orlando decided to sell DK, knowing the fact that, if you can have a healthy DK for the entire year, and if he can get back to the level that he was a couple of years ago, you're going to once again sell him off in the summer transfer window for a much bigger margin. And in some way, that I would say that could be something that Orlando City maybe might have some buyer's remorse when it comes to the summer transfer window, in case if DK does light up with West Brom. But that being said, I get why maybe they decided to ship him off, because there's also that risk of the fact that he doesn't pan out in the first half of the season, and you're going to get less money for him. And you could also have a situation where you might hold on to a player a little bit too long, and if he doesn't improve in a way that a lot of these European teams are keeping an eye on these MLS team and these young players, and get ready to snatch them up with some money to pay them, then yeah, that could of course be a bit of an issue. So in some way, I would say this was a very conservative kind of way that Orlando City decided to go through their business, selling DK in the winter transfer window and take the $10 million. Though, as I said before, I'm not sure does it comes with a sell-on fee. I mean, if it does come with a sell-on fee, then I think it's a good business, because if DK does sell it off to another team after his stint with West Brom is done, which that he signed with the club for 4.5 years, and it's going to be interesting to see how long he's going to be lasting here, even though his contract with West Brom isn't going to be done until like 2026. But we'll see if he is sold off, and that West Brom is able to sell DK for a big amount of money. At least Orlando City can of course get some of those money too, because of the sell-on fee. And then of course the third thing is that the defense was relatively solid for most of the game this season. I mean, a part of that has to do with the fact that Pedro Galese, I've always said that he's definitely one of the top tier goalkeeper in the league, and throughout this season you can see he made some really incredible saves. But overall, I thought the defense this season was relatively solid, and even though there's been times where they are a little bit iffy, most of the time they are consistent. I mean, that's kind of the way with how MLS defense is nowadays, with the way that you're going to, no, it is pretty much now gone the days where MLS are really solely focused on defense, because it seems like this league and a lot of team of how they built their team, they really focus mostly on their attack, and they'll definitely hope that their defense is solid, but that's not one of the main priority that they're going to do. So I think overall Orlando City, their defense was really good, but it also was back because of the fact that Pedro Galese, again, I mean, another incredible season this year with Orlando City. So what went wrong for the Lions this season? Well, the attack was toothless in most of the game. I mean, it's hard to believe when you have the likes of Nani and even at times Daryl DK in the same attack, and also Chris Mueller there up front. This team looked really toothless going for on the attack. I mean, there was times where they just missed some big opportunity, or there's time where maybe sometimes they go up 1-0 and they don't kill the game off, let the opposition kind of keep into the game before conceding a late goal. That of course does happen too. But overall, the attack, it was just definitely not as good as it was last year, which is kind of a surprise consider, this is almost the same attack as the one that was last season, and you would think that an attack that as rock solid as it was last year would continue to do so, but there was definitely some regression this year with that attack. They had that mini collapse in September, and in some way they were also having that inconsistent run in October. So this is why I talk about how, when you look at Orlando City, they always have their annual tradition collapse happening right around June and right in the beginning of the second half of the season. And while this mini collapse kind of didn't happen until late in the season, it almost cost them a playoff spot. Like, I remember that 4-game losing streak. And yes, I know during that 4-game they were playing against some of the toughest team in the Eastern Conference, and that it was a murderous road that they have to go through. But this is also where I get to the third point that went wrong for Orlando City, and why I said before how a lot of people think that this team is a complete pretender in the Eastern Conference, is they struggle against good team. And I've said before, when you are facing against the best team in the league, I mean, yes, you want to of course put up a good fight on them, but you also need to win and make a statement. Like, if you are considering yourself an MLS Cup contender, you need to beat the best of the league. And the fact that Orlando City didn't do so, and at time looked completely outmatched in some of those games, it just shows that this team looked like they could potentially get themselves killed in the playoffs. Because you know who you're going to be facing in the playoffs? Oh yeah, it's those same good team that you of course have to face. And that, again, we've seen before where sometimes team, when they make it to the playoffs, it's a good to see that they of course make it to the playoffs. But then you also look at some of the wins, and that, it's no surprise that there are a lot of people don't give a lot of credit to teams that made it to the playoffs just because they made it just playing against easy opponent and kind of stat padding against them. And it just kind of feel like that was the case with Orlando City this season. I mean, they do a good job in terms of taking teams that they need to beat, but when it comes to again, some of these teams that they're fighting to trying to stay near the top 4 of the Eastern Conference, or maybe even contending for the rights to go to MLS Cup out of the Eastern Conference, they just were really they were just not good enough against those teams. So moving forward for this Orlando City team, so one thing that I think is kind of flying a little bit under the radar with Orlando City this year is that they actually have a new ownership. The Will family, of course, purchased Orlando City in the middle of the year, and it's going to be interesting to see whether or not if they're going to open the pockets even more. I mean, this Orlando City team has never been afraid to spend some money. I mean, even the previous ownership have spent some big amount of money to invest in the team. But from what I heard, it seems like the new ownership with the Will family, they're even thinking about spending a little more. And they have a chance to definitely open the pockets too, because, with the way that both Nani and DK is gone in this team, they now is able to open up 2 DP spot for this team. And there's no doubt that those DP spot is going to be solely focused on the number 9 position, and also potentially a new winger. I mean, the number 9 position, they need to find a replacement for Daryl DK. I mean, as much as I am a fan of Benji Michel and occasionally with Tesha Akindele, that they're not going to be the guy that is going to carry this team in terms of the goal scoring department. So they definitely need to get a DP number 9 this off season. And not to mention the fact that I think Alexander Pato, the guy that they bought last off season, yeah, it's fortunate the fact that they did not keep him, but I understand why they decided not to keep Pato, considering he is also aging, and the injury concern that it has really been kind of the story of Pato's career. It kind of happened again in Orlando City, being out for majority of the year, didn't come back until late in the year, and it just feel like maybe that's why Orlando City kind of didn't want to give Pato a chance to come back to this team because they know that he's going to be once again injury prone. So again, they'll definitely need to find a number 9 this offseason, and it has to be a DP signing. And also on the wing too. I mean, losing Nani, their most important player, is gonna hurt, but also losing Chris Mueller is going to hurt too. Even though I know Mueller definitely had an off year this season, it just kind of also felt like he was mentally checked out in the second half of the season, knowing the fact that he's ready to make his big move to Europe. I mean, I know for most of the time he says that he is still focused with Orlando City, but yeah, there's times when I see him play, it seems like he's focused of going to Hibernian in Scotland and ready to get himself a chance in Europe, rather than the fact that, you know, you want to finish strong with the current team that you have. And that happens. I mean, we've seen before where players, they know that they're about to go bound to Europe, and it's kind of hard to of course give it you're all with a team when you're pretty much bound to go to Europe. But that being said, you also need to of course perform, and maybe, you know, even get like a pre-impression that you're going to be a decent player. And I don't think Chris Mueller really did that, especially in the latter part of the season. But the last thing moving forward for this Orlando City team is, I feel like they still need some more depth in the back line. I mean, as much as I know this back line, and when you look at the starters of this back line, is considered probably really one, if not the best back line we've seen in the league, they do lack some depth in terms of that spot. So I'm pretty sure they're going to spend some TAM and GAM money to improve their back line a little bit. And you know, if they can do that alongside with getting some DP player, then this team should be back to being a threat in the Eastern Conference. I mean, again, I know they lost a lot of pieces this offseason, but as long as they're able to replace them, and by the way, I have heard that there is rumor that they are looking to sign a number 9 down in Uruguay, and that they're actually looking at a Pinero forward, which I forgot what was his name is, but I'll definitely mention it in my news of the week video that I'll make tomorrow. They're looking to sign him as a replacement for DK. So it's not like they're just sitting here and hope that they will find a replacement. They are actively looking for a replacement of those players that they lost. And again, I expect this team should be once again a contender in the Eastern Conference, and hope that the minor setback that they had this season will not be the case heading into next year. But let me know in the comments below, if you're an Orlando City fan, what do you think of this season, and what went right, went wrong, and most importantly, moving forward, how is this team going to look next season? And yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you do, make sure you guys leave a like, smash the subscribe button, and yeah, I of course will see you guys next time.